Atlanta glittered beneath the morning sun, its skyscrapers reflecting gold across the glass towers that stretched toward the clouds. At the very top of the tallest building stood Ethan Carter, one of America's youngest self-made billionaires. To the world, Ethan had everything. He owned luxury hotels across the United States, technology companies worth billions, private jets, yachts, mansions. His face appeared on magazine covers every month, celebrated as one of America's most successful entrepreneurs before turning 35. But every morning began exactly the same. Silence. The enormous penthouse echoed with emptiness. There was no laughter, no family, no one waiting to say good morning. Only the quiet hum of the city below. Ethan loosened his expensive tie and stared out the window. "Is this really success?" he whispered. A knock interrupted his thoughts. His assistant, Olivia, stepped inside carrying a leather folder. "Good morning, Mr. Carter." He turned with a tired smile. "Morning, Olivia. You have breakfast with investors at 9, interviews at 11, and the charity gala tonight." He nodded without enthusiasm. "Anything else?" She hesitated. "There are 12 more invitations from women asking to meet you." Ethan sighed. "Throw them away." Olivia wasn't surprised. Every day, letters arrived. Social media influencers, models, businesswomen, celebrities, each claiming she admired Ethan. But he had stopped believing compliments years ago. Because every conversation eventually reached the same destination. His money, his companies, his lifestyle. Never his heart, never the lonely man behind the headlines. Later that morning, Ethan entered Carter Global Holdings. Hundreds of employees stood respectfully. "Good morning, Mr. Carter." "Morning, sir." Everyone admired him. Few actually knew him. The quarterly meeting began. Profits had reached another record. The executives applauded. One director smiled proudly. "We've made another $300 million this quarter." Everyone celebrated. Except Ethan. Money no longer excited him. He already had more than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. As the applause faded, his phone vibrated. His friend Marcus had sent a message. "Don't forget tonight's charity gala. My cousin wants to introduce you to someone. She's gorgeous." Ethan smiled bitterly. Another setup. Another woman who already knew his net worth before knowing his favorite color. He slipped the phone back into his pocket. That evening, Atlanta's most luxurious hotel sparkled beneath thousands of lights. The annual charity gala attracted politicians, celebrities, athletes, and billionaires from across America. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the ballroom. Champagne flowed freely. Every guest wore designer fashion. The moment Ethan entered, cameras exploded. Flash, flash, flash. "Ethan. This way. Look over here." He forced another practiced smile. Inside, Marcus greeted him with a laugh. "There you are." Marcus hugged him warmly. "I've got someone you need to meet." Before Ethan could answer, an elegant woman in a shimmering gold gown approached. "Hi, Ethan." She smiled confidently. "I'm Sophia. I've heard wonderful things about you." For the next 20 minutes, she laughed at every joke Ethan made. She complimented his intelligence, his kindness, his ambition. Then, almost casually, she asked, "So, which one is your private jet?" Ethan's smile disappeared. There it is, he thought. It always comes. The conversation ended minutes later. She walked away disappointed after realizing Ethan wasn't interested. Marcus sighed. What happened now? Ethan looked around the glamorous ballroom. "I don't think she ever looked into my eyes." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" "She only looked at my wallet." Outside, the cool night air felt refreshing. Ethan climbed into his black Rolls-Royce. Instead of heading home, he asked his driver, "Take me somewhere ordinary." The driver looked confused. "Sir? Anywhere people don't know my name." Half an hour later, they arrived in a quiet neighborhood. Small diners, old bookstores, families walking together, children laughing. No paparazzi. No cameras. No one cared who he was. For the first time in weeks, Ethan smiled. He noticed an elderly couple sharing one hamburger while laughing as if they owned the world. A father carried his sleepy daughter on his shoulders. Teenagers played basketball in a neighborhood court. Nobody here looked rich. Yet everyone looked happy. Something inside Ethan shifted. Maybe wealth wasn't the problem. Maybe fame was. Maybe people couldn't love someone they already believed was perfect. That night he couldn't sleep. His grandfather's words echoed in his memory. When people know your money first, they'll never show you their real hearts. His grandfather had built the Carter family fortune from nothing. He had always dressed simply. He often visited neighborhoods where nobody recognized him. As a child, Ethan had asked why. His grandfather smiled. The richest thing a man can own isn't money. It's knowing who truly loves him. Ethan sat upright. His heart raced. What if I disappear? The next morning, Ethan called only 3 people. His lawyer, his assistant, his closest friend Marcus. They gathered in his office. I've made a decision. Marcus raised an eyebrow. What kind? I'm leaving. Silence filled the room. Olivia blinked. Leaving where? The billionaire life. Marcus laughed. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. The lawyer frowned. The board will never approve. They don't need to. Marcus leaned forward. Ethan, what exactly are you planning? Ethan smiled for the first time in months. I'm going to become invisible. You've lost your mind. No. I've finally found it. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a plan. His companies would continue operating under the board. Olivia would manage emergencies. Only 4 people would know where Ethan really was. Everyone else would believe he was traveling overseas for business. Marcus stared at him. And then? I'm going to live like an ordinary man. No luxury. No security. No expensive cars. No designer suits. Marcus shook his head. Why? Ethan answered quietly. Because I want someone to love Ethan. Before they ever meet the billionaire. For the first time in 15 years, Ethan Carter unlocked the door to a home that wasn't a mansion. The apartment was barely 600 square feet. The paint on the walls had faded. The kitchen was tiny. The bedroom held only a simple bed and an old wooden dresser. No marble floors. No priceless artwork. No private elevator. No butler waiting to greet him. Ethan smiled. This feels real. He set his duffel bag on the floor and slowly looked around. There was something peaceful about the silence. No security guards outside the door. No assistants reminding him of meetings. No ringing phones. Just the sound of birds singing outside the window. For the first time in years, he made his own bed. He cleaned the apartment himself. He even cooked scrambled eggs for breakfast. The meal wasn't perfect. He laughed after accidentally burning the toast. I guess I'm out of practice. It was the happiest breakfast he'd had in years. The next stop was a neighborhood thrift store. The elderly cashier smiled warmly. Morning, son. Morning. She noticed his expensive posture but ordinary clothes. Looking for work clothes? He nodded. Something simple. She helped him choose faded jeans. Plain t-shirts. A gray hoodie. A pair of work boots. An old baseball cap. When Ethan reached for his platinum credit card, he stopped. He had prepared for this. Instead, he paid with cash. The cashier handed him the change. Good luck with your new job. He smiled. Thank you. No one had wished him luck in years. People usually congratulated him for being rich. This simple stranger wished him well because she believed he was starting over. Somehow, that meant more. By afternoon, Ethan stood outside a used car dealership. Rows of shiny cars sparkled in the sunlight, but he ignored them. Instead, his eyes stopped on an old blue pickup truck. The paint had faded. The seats were worn. The engine rattled slightly. The salesman walked over. You sure you don't want something newer? Ethan grinned. No. I think this one has character. The salesman laughed. She's old, but she'll never quit. Perfect. As Ethan drove away, he couldn't stop smiling. It wasn't fast. It wasn't luxurious. But it felt free. Days turned into a week. No board meetings. No interviews. No business dinners. Instead, he bought groceries. Did his own laundry. Waited in line at coffee shops. Nobody recognized him. Nobody asked for selfies. Nobody called him Mr. Carter. To everyone, he was just Ethan. And strangely, that made him feel alive again. One morning he noticed a sign outside a brick building. Volunteers needed Hope Community Center. Without thinking, he walked inside. Children laughed as they painted colorful pictures. Teenagers played basketball in the gym. Volunteers prepared food for struggling families. The director, Mrs. Robinson, smiled kindly. You looking for someone? I saw your sign. You want to volunteer? If you'll have me. She smiled. We always need good people. She handed him an apron. Can you help unload food donations? He nodded. I'd love to. Hours passed quickly. Ethan carried heavy boxes. Sorted canned food. Cleaned tables. Served meals. No one knew the man handing out soup owned companies worth billions. And for once, that was exactly how he wanted it. Mrs. Robinson watched him carefully. Most volunteers came once, then disappeared, but Ethan stayed until sunset. As everyone prepared to leave, she walked over. "You work hard," he smiled. "My grandfather always said, if you're too important to serve others, you're too small to lead." Mrs. Robinson nodded slowly. "I like that. So do I." The following Friday, heavy rain covered Atlanta. Dark clouds rolled across the city. Cars splashed through flooded streets. Ethan had just finished unloading supplies when he noticed someone running toward the center. A young woman held a stack of school books against her chest. The wind suddenly caught her umbrella. She lost her balance. The books scattered across the wet sidewalk. Children's notebooks, storybooks, colored pencils. Everything soaked by the rain. Without hesitation, Ethan ran forward. Together, they knelt on the wet pavement gathering the books. "I'm so sorry," she said breathlessly. "The wind." "It's okay." He smiled. "It wasn't your fault." She looked up for the first time. Her eyes were warm, kind, different. She wasn't wearing expensive clothes. Just a simple blue sweater and dark jeans. Her natural beauty needed no designer labels. "I'm Amara." "Ethan." They shook hands. She laughed softly. "I guess this isn't the best first impression. I've seen worse." She smiled. "I teach 3rd grade. These books belong to my students." Ethan carefully wiped the rainwater from a children's storybook. "You really care about them. They deserve someone who believes in them." Those words stayed with him. Most people talked about money, success, status. Amara talked about children. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She simply spoke from her heart. Mrs. Robinson called from the doorway. "Amara. There you are." Amara smiled. "I volunteer here every Friday." Ethan blinked. "So do I." Mrs. Robinson laughed. "Looks like I've got 2 of my best volunteers meeting at last." Rain continued falling around them. Neither noticed. For the first time in a very long time, Ethan forgot he had ever been a billionaire. And for the first time, Amara looked at him without seeing wealth. She only saw a kind man helping her in the rain. Neither of them knew. This rainy afternoon would become the beginning of a love story that would change both of their lives forever. The following Friday, Ethan arrived at the Hope Community Center earlier than usual. He wasn't there because Mrs. Robinson had asked him to help. He was there because he secretly hoped to see Amara again. As he unloaded boxes of donated books, the front door opened. "There you are," a cheerful voice called. Ethan turned. Amara walked in carrying 2 large grocery bags. She wore a simple yellow sweater, blue jeans, and white sneakers. Her curly hair was tied back neatly, and despite the early hour, she wore the same warm smile he remembered from the rainy afternoon. "Good morning," Ethan said. "Morning." Mrs. Robinson laughed as she watched them. "I was wondering how long it would take before you 2 became friends." Amara smiled. "We've only met once." Mrs. Robinson winked. "Sometimes once is enough." Both of them laughed. For the next several hours, they worked side by side. They organized books, prepared lunch for local families, helped children paint colorful pictures. Ethan noticed something extraordinary. Every child adored Amara. The shy children smiled when she entered the room. The noisy children immediately listened when she spoke. She remembered every child's name, every birthday, every favorite storybook. One little boy ran toward her. "Miss Johnson." She knelt and hugged him. "Hi, Caleb. Guess what?" "What?" "I got an A in reading." Amara clapped excitedly. "I knew you could do it." She looked genuinely happier about the child's report card than most executives looked after earning millions. Ethan quietly watched from across the room. Money could buy almost anything, but it couldn't buy a heart like hers. During lunch, they sat together outside beneath a large oak tree. They shared homemade sandwiches. No luxury restaurant. No expensive wine. Just fresh air. Birds singing. Children laughing nearby. Amara smiled. "So, what did you do before volunteering here?" Ethan had prepared for questions like this. "I worked in maintenance." "Really?" He nodded. "I fixed buildings." She smiled. "That explains why you're always helping everyone. What about you?" "I've wanted to teach since I was 8. "What inspired you?" She looked toward the playground. "My grandmother. She raised me. She always said, a child only needs one person who believes in them. So I became that person." Ethan nodded slowly. "My grandfather used to say something similar." What? The greatest investment you'll ever make is in people. They smiled at each other. Neither realized how much their grandparents had shaped the people they had become. Weeks passed. Friday became Ethan's favorite day. Then Saturdays. Soon they began volunteering together twice a week. Sometimes they cleaned neighborhood parks. Sometimes they delivered food to elderly residents. Sometimes they simply sat on park benches talking for hours. One evening they stopped by a small food truck. Amara ordered 2 cheeseburgers. When Ethan reached for his wallet, she gently stopped him. "My turn. You paid last time." "I don't mind." She laughed. "Neither do I." Before he could argue, she had already paid. It wasn't about the money. She simply wanted to share. Ethan couldn't remember the last time someone insisted on buying him dinner. Usually people expected him to pay for everything. This felt different. This felt honest. Across the street, a luxury white sports car stopped at a traffic light. Inside sat Vanessa Brooks, one of Atlanta's most famous influencers. Designer handbag, diamond earrings, perfect makeup, perfect hair. She noticed Ethan climbing into his old blue pickup truck. She laughed loudly. "Oh my goodness. That truck belongs in a museum." Her friend looked over. "Who's he?" "No idea. But if he's driving that thing, he definitely isn't successful." They laughed as the sports car sped away. Ethan heard every word. He simply smiled. Amara looked upset. "People can be so cruel." "It's okay." "No. It isn't." She folded her arms. "My grandmother says, never judge someone by what they drive. Judge them by how they treat people." Ethan looked at her quietly. No one had defended him like that in years. Not because he was powerful. Not because he was rich. Simply because she believed it was the right thing to do. In that moment, he realized he was no longer pretending. He was genuinely falling in love. That night, Ethan sat alone in his small apartment. His phone buzzed repeatedly. 30 missed calls. Dozens of emails. His assistant Olivia finally reached him. "Mr. Carter. The board is asking when you'll return." "I'm not ready. They're getting worried." He smiled. "Tell them the company is doing just fine without me." She laughed softly. "Actually, it is. Then they don't need me yet." Olivia hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you happy?" Ethan looked around his tiny apartment. His worn boots stood beside the door. A stack of library books rested on the table. A photo of his grandfather leaned against the wall. For the first time in years, he answered without hesitation. "Yes. I think I'm finally learning how." The next morning, Amara invited Ethan to visit her grandmother. "You've heard so many stories about her. I think she'd like to meet you." Ethan smiled. "I'd be honored." As they drove through a quiet neighborhood, Ethan felt strangely nervous. He had met presidents, movie stars, world leaders. Yet meeting one elderly grandmother made his heart race. When they reached the small brick house, an elderly woman opened the front door before they even knocked. "You must be Ethan." She smiled knowingly. "And you must be Mrs. Grace." Grandmother Grace laughed. "Oh no. Everyone calls me Grandma Grace." She hugged Ethan warmly. "You look like a good man." Ethan smiled. "I hope so." As they sat around the dinner table sharing homemade fried chicken, cornbread, and sweet tea, Grandma Grace quietly watched Ethan. She noticed the way he pulled out Amara's chair before sitting down. The way he thanked her for every dish. The way he helped clear the table afterward without being asked. Later that evening, while Amara washed dishes, Grandma Grace quietly approached Ethan on the porch. She looked into his eyes. "Son, can I ask you something?" "Of course. What are you hiding?" Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He forced a smile. "I'm not sure what you mean." The old woman smiled gently. "I've lived a long time. I know when someone carries a secret." Ethan remained silent. Grandma Grace placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Whatever it is, I hope it never keeps you from loving honestly." Her words echoed in his mind long after he drove away. Because for the first time, he wondered if his greatest test wasn't for Amara, but for himself. The weeks passed quickly. By now, Ethan and Amara had become inseparable. Every Saturday morning they volunteered together. Every Sunday afternoon they visited Grandma Grace. Every evening they talked for hours. Sometimes about childhood dreams. Sometimes about their fears. Sometimes about nothing at all. For the first time in many years, Ethan found himself laughing without pretending. He had stopped counting business profits. Instead, he counted moments. One Saturday evening, the three of them sat around Grandma Grace's dining table enjoying homemade peach cobbler. Grandma Grace smiled as she watched Ethan and Amara teasing each other. You know, she chuckled, I've never seen Amara smile this much. Amara blushed. Grandma. What? I'm only telling the truth. Ethan laughed. I'll take that as a compliment. Grandma Grace nodded. You should. You brought light back into this house. Just then, Grandma Grace reached for her glass of water. Her hand suddenly began to shake. The glass slipped from her fingers and shattered across the floor. She pressed her hand against her chest. Her breathing became heavy. Grandma. Amara jumped from her chair. Grandma, what's wrong? The elderly woman tried to answer, but no words came. She collapsed. Ethan reacted instantly. He gently lifted Grandma Grace into his arms. Get in the truck. Amara was crying. Please, please don't leave me. Rain poured heavily as Ethan sped toward the nearest hospital. Every red light felt like an eternity. Minutes later, doctors rushed Grandma Grace into the emergency room. The waiting room fell silent. Amara sat trembling in her chair. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Ethan quietly removed his jacket and placed it around her shoulders. It's going to be okay. She looked at him with tear-filled eyes. I've already lost my parents. I can't lose her too. Ethan gently held her hand. You won't face this alone. For nearly an hour they waited. Finally, a doctor stepped into the waiting room. Family? Amara stood immediately. I'm her granddaughter. The doctor's expression was serious. She suffered a mild heart attack. Amara covered her mouth. But we stabilized her. Relief flooded the room. Then the doctor continued. However, she needs surgery as soon as possible. The estimated cost will be around $180,000. Amara's face turned pale. $180,000? She whispered the number as though it belonged to another world. I don't have that kind of money. Later that night, after Amara finally fell asleep in the waiting room, Ethan quietly stepped outside. He pulled out a phone he hadn't used in months. He dialed only one number. Olivia answered immediately. Mr. Carter? I need a favor. Anything. There is a patient named Grace Johnson. I want every medical expense covered. Private room. Best specialists. Whatever treatment she needs. Olivia didn't hesitate. I'll handle it immediately. And Olivia. Yes? Make sure nobody knows it came from me. Not even Amara. I understand. Within minutes, Carter Medical Foundation transferred the entire amount. The hospital administrator personally approved the payment. The account simply read, Anonymous donor. The next morning, the hospital accountant approached Amara with a smile. Miss Johnson? Yes? I have good news. Your grandmother's surgery has been fully paid. Amara blinked. What? The entire balance. She stared in disbelief. There must be a mistake. No. An anonymous donor covered everything. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She looked toward the ceiling. Thank you, God. Then she whispered. Whoever you are, thank you. Standing at the end of the hallway, Ethan quietly smiled. He expected nothing in return. Seeing relief on Amara's face was enough. Meanwhile, across town, Vanessa Brooks sat inside an upscale cafe scrolling through social media. One photo caught her attention. It showed Ethan volunteering at the Hope Community Center. She frowned. Why does he look so familiar? She zoomed in. Something about his face reminded her of someone. She opened a business magazine from a few months earlier. There, on the cover, was Billionaire CEO Ethan Carter. Clean-shaven. Expensive suit. Perfect hairstyle. Vanessa looked back at the volunteer photo. The beard. The hoodie. The cap. Different. But the eyes. The eyes are exactly the same. Her heart raced. No way. She grabbed her laptop. Within minutes she searched every article about Ethan Carter. One headline read, CEO Ethan Carter disappears from public life for several months. Vanessa's eyes widened. Oh, my goodness. She whispered. The poor guy is actually a billionaire. A slow smile spread across her face. This changes everything. She immediately hired a private investigator. I want to know where he's living, who he's spending time with, and especially, who that woman is. She looked once more at the photo of Ethan and Amara laughing together. Her expression hardened. If he's really worth billions, I'm not letting some schoolteacher marry him. That same evening, Grandma Grace woke after her successful surgery. She smiled weakly as Ethan and Amara entered her room. I guess God isn't finished with me yet. Amara hugged her carefully. We almost lost you. Grandma Grace looked at Ethan. You stayed? He nodded. I wasn't going anywhere. The elderly woman smiled knowingly. You remind me of someone. My late husband. He always helped people quietly. Without asking for credit. Ethan lowered his eyes. For a brief moment. He wondered if she somehow knew the truth. As they left the hospital that evening, Ethan noticed a black SUV parked across the street. Inside, a man lifted a camera and snapped several photographs. Click, click, click. Ethan's smile faded. Someone was watching. And deep down, he knew the peaceful life he had built was about to be shattered. The black SUV remained parked across the street. Inside, private investigator Daniel Brooks adjusted the lens of his professional camera. Click, click, click. Every photograph captured Ethan beside Amara, helping her into the truck, opening the passenger door, holding her hand as they crossed the street. Daniel smiled. This is exactly what Miss Vanessa wanted. He immediately emailed the photographs. Only seconds later, Vanessa opened them on her phone. A slow, satisfied smile spread across her face. So, the billionaire really fell in love with a schoolteacher. She laughed softly. Poor girl. She doesn't even know who she's dating. Vanessa closed the folder and picked up another file. It contained Ethan Carter's complete background. His companies. His investments. His properties. His charitable foundation. His estimated net worth. $8.7 billion. She leaned back in her chair. If I expose him, he'll have no choice but to notice me. Meanwhile, life continued peacefully for Ethan and Amara. Grandma Grace returned home after recovering from surgery. Every evening, Ethan stopped by with groceries. Sometimes he repaired broken shelves. Sometimes he mowed the lawn. Sometimes he simply sat on the porch listening to Grandma Grace tell stories from her youth. One evening, Grandma Grace looked at Ethan with a gentle smile. You're not afraid of hard work. My grandfather never allowed me to be. She nodded approvingly. That's becoming rare these days. Amara smiled. He's stubborn too. Ethan laughed. I prefer determined. The three of them burst into laughter. For a brief moment, everything felt perfect. But happiness often arrives quietly. Just before the storm. 2 days later, Vanessa made her move. She walked confidently into Carter Global headquarters. The receptionist immediately recognized her. Do you have an appointment? No. But Ethan Carter will definitely want to see me. I'm sorry, Mr. Carter isn't available. Vanessa smiled. Oh. Tell him I know where he's been living. The receptionist's smile disappeared. Within minutes, Olivia received the message. She immediately called Ethan. Mr. Carter. We have a problem. Ethan stepped outside the grocery store. What happened? Someone knows. His heart skipped. Who? Vanessa Brooks. He closed his eyes. How much does she know? Enough. And she's asking to meet you. Ethan remained silent. I'll handle it. No. Olivia sounded worried. Mr. Carter. Please be careful. That afternoon, Ethan met Vanessa in a quiet hotel lounge. She smiled confidently. It's been a long time. What do you want? She leaned forward. You've been hiding. Yes. Why? That's none of your business. Vanessa laughed. Oh. But it is now. She slid several photographs across the table. Pictures of Ethan and Amara. Pictures outside the community center. Pictures at Grandma Grace's house. Pictures outside the hospital. I know everything. Ethan looked at the photographs without reacting. What do you want? Vanessa smiled. Simple. End this little game. And date someone who actually belongs in your world. Ethan slowly stood. My world? Yes. Billionaires. Luxury. Power. He smiled calmly. You still don't understand. She frowned. What? I left that world. Because people like you live in it. Without another word, he walked away. Vanessa's face turned cold. If I can't have you, no one will. The next morning, Atlanta woke to shocking headlines. Mystery surrounds billionaire CEO Ethan Carter. Has the billionaire been living in secret? Television stations replayed old interviews. Social media exploded. News helicopters circled Carter Global headquarters. Reporters searched everywhere. By noon, someone posted a photograph of Ethan's old blue pickup truck. The internet quickly connected the clues. Within hours, paparazzi flooded the quiet neighborhood where Ethan lived. Flashing cameras lit up the street. Neighbors stared in confusion. Isn't that Ethan Carter? The billionaire? I thought he was just the new guy upstairs. Amara had just finished teaching her class when another teacher rushed into the classroom holding a phone. Amara, you need to see this. She looked down at the screen. A news article displayed Ethan's face beside a headline. America's reclusive billionaire found living as a poor man. Her smile disappeared. No. She whispered. That's impossible. The teacher scrolled further. There were photographs. Business magazine covers. Award ceremonies. Private jets. Luxury homes. Presidents shaking Ethan's hand. The man she believed repaired buildings. Owned an empire. Amara's hands began to shake. Her heart refused to believe what her eyes were seeing. She drove straight to Ethan's apartment. The street was packed with reporters. Camera flashes exploded everywhere. Ethan, why did you disappear? Is the story true? Are you engaged? Ethan finally stepped outside. The crowd surged toward him. At that exact moment, Amara stood frozen on the opposite side of the street. Their eyes met. For a moment, the noise disappeared. Only silence remained between them. She slowly walked toward him. Tears filled her eyes. One question escaped her lips. Who are you? Ethan took one step forward. Amara. I can explain. She shook her head. You told me you fixed buildings. I do. You said you struggled. I wanted you to know me. Not my money. You lied. Her voice broke. Every single day. You lied. It wasn't like that. Then what was it? Were you testing me? Ethan couldn't answer. Because the truth was yes. A tear rolled down Amara's cheek. I trusted you. And trust means everything to me. She slowly removed the small handmade bracelet she had given Ethan weeks earlier. She placed it gently in his hand. Then she whispered. I fell in love with a man named Ethan. I don't know the billionaire standing in front of me. Without another word, she turned and walked away. Ethan stood motionless as the reporters continued shouting questions around him. For the first time since becoming a billionaire, he realized something terrifying. Money had never made him feel powerless. But losing the woman he loved did. 3 weeks passed. For Ethan Carter, they were the longest 3 weeks of his life. The man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals, who had built one of the largest companies in America, who had never been afraid of taking risks, now woke up every morning hoping for a single text message. But his phone remained silent. Amara didn't answer his calls. She politely declined every letter he sent. She even stopped volunteering at the Hope Community Center. The place that once filled Ethan's heart with joy now felt painfully empty. Mrs. Robinson noticed the sadness in his eyes. You miss her? Ethan nodded. I never meant to hurt her. Mrs. Robinson sighed. Love isn't only about good intentions. It's also about trust. Those words stayed with him. He realized he had been so focused on testing Amara's heart that he had forgotten to protect it. One afternoon, Ethan gathered the courage to visit Grandma Grace. She welcomed him with the same warm smile as always. I was wondering when you'd come. Ethan lowered his head. I don't know if I deserve to. Grandma Grace poured 2 cups of tea. After several moments of silence, she spoke softly. Do you know why Amara is hurting? Because I lied. No. Ethan looked surprised. You didn't lie because you hated her. You lied because you were afraid. He looked down. I was terrified. Every woman I've ever dated loved my money first. Grandma Grace nodded. I know. But son, she leaned forward. You tested her love, without giving her the chance to test yours. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? You asked whether she could love a poor man. But she never got to discover whether a billionaire could love a simple schoolteacher. The words struck him like lightning. For the first time, he understood. This had never been about money. It had always been about honesty. That evening, Grandma Grace visited Amara. She found her granddaughter sitting alone on the porch, still wearing the small silver necklace Ethan had once given her. You still love him? Amara looked away. I don't know. Grandma Grace smiled. Oh, you know. You're just afraid. He lied to me. Yes. And that was wrong. But answer one question. When I was in the hospital, who stayed every single night? Amara whispered. Ethan. When your car broke down, who walked 5 miles to bring you home? Ethan. When the children at school needed books, who quietly delivered them? Ethan. Grandma Grace gently held her hand. His money didn't do those things. His heart did. Tears slowly filled Amara's eyes. The following week, Atlanta buzzed with excitement. Carter Global announced the opening of 10 new schools in underserved neighborhoods. Reporters gathered from across the country. Television crews lined the streets. Everyone expected Ethan to give another speech about business. Instead, he walked onto the stage wearing the same simple gray hoodie he had worn when he first met Amara. The audience whispered in surprise. He smiled gently. "I've spent years building companies. I thought success was measured by money. I was wrong." He paused. "The richest people I've ever met were those who had very little, but shared everything." The crowd applauded. Then Ethan continued. "Today, Carter Global is donating $1 billion to education, community health, and housing programs across America." The audience rose to their feet. But Ethan wasn't finished. "There is one more person I want to thank." His eyes searched the crowd. Finally, he found her. Amara stood quietly beside Grandma Grace. She had come only because Grandma Grace insisted. Their eyes met. Everything else disappeared. Ethan stepped down from the stage. Instead of waiting for Amara, he walked all the way across the lawn until he stood in front of her. No cameras mattered anymore. No reporters. Only the woman he loved. He took a deep breath. "Amara, I don't deserve another chance. But I want to tell you something." She remained silent. "I pretended to be poor. Because I was afraid no one would ever love the real me. I thought hiding my money would protect my heart." He looked down. "Instead, I broke yours." Tears rolled down Amara's cheeks. "I can't erase what I did. I can't ask you to forget. But if I could choose again, I would tell you the truth on the very first day." He slowly reached into his pocket. Not for a diamond ring, but for the handmade friendship bracelet she had once given him. "I never stopped wearing it. I never will." Amara stared at the worn bracelet. She realized he had carried it every single day. Even after she walked away. Grandma Grace smiled quietly. "I think you've both suffered enough." The crowd watched in complete silence. Amara stepped closer. She gently took Ethan's hand. "I was never angry because you were rich. I was angry because you didn't trust me." "I know. And trust has to be earned again." Ethan nodded. "I'll spend the rest of my life earning it." A small smile appeared on her face. "I believe you." The crowd erupted into applause. Several months later, the Atlanta Botanical Garden was filled with flowers. Family, friends, children from the Hope Community Center, teachers, hospital staff, every person whose life had been touched by Ethan or Amara gathered together. There were no celebrities, no politicians, only people who genuinely loved them. As the sun began to set, Ethan knelt on one knee. This time, he held a simple velvet box. Inside was a beautiful diamond ring. "Amara Johnson, you loved me when you thought I had nothing. You challenged me to become a better man. You taught me that kindness is worth more than billions. Will you marry me?" Amara smiled through tears. "Yes. 1,000 times, yes." Cheers echoed through the gardens. Children threw flower petals into the air. Grandma Grace wiped away happy tears. Mrs. Robinson hugged everyone she could reach. Marcus laughed. "I guess disappearing was the best business decision you ever made." Ethan smiled. "No. Meeting Amara was." 1 year later, the Carter Foundation had built schools, libraries, and community centers across neighborhoods that had long been overlooked. Amara became the director of the education program. Ethan spent less time chasing profits and more time visiting classrooms. Whenever children asked how they met, Ethan would smile and say, "Your teacher saved me." Amara would laugh. "I didn't save you. You found yourself." Grandma Grace, now healthy and full of energy, often sat outside the first school they built together, watching children run across the playground. One little girl asked her, "Grandma Grace, how do you know if someone really loves you?" The old woman smiled. "Real love doesn't look at what you own. It looks at who you are." She pointed toward Ethan and Amara, who were helping children plant flowers in the school garden. Those two learned that lesson the hard way. The little girl smiled. "They look happy." "They are." As the sun slowly disappeared behind the Atlanta skyline, Ethan wrapped his arm around Amara. They watched hundreds of children laughing together. Not because of wealth, not because of fame, but because someone had chosen to care. Ethan whispered, "My grandfather was right. The richest thing a person can own is knowing who truly loves them." Amara squeezed his hand. "And now you know." He smiled. "Yes. I finally do."